We were the first surf shop to post used gear online. So we were
Wow.
kind of an early innovator there. And over the course of the next decade or so, really developed into one of the premier wind sports shops in the country and probably the world. Had customers who talking about escaping shark attacks, not here, obviously, in other
Right,
places.
right.
Folks who've almost gotten run over by ferry boats, but somehow miraculously hopped on top of them at the last minute.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite. When we hear some of the great stories that our customers have, and a lot of them are pretty epic.
We'll just jump straight in if that's okay.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your store, how you started, and what the early days looked like?
Yeah, Windance Boardshop is a wind sports specialty retailer. We started back in 1984 selling windsurf repairs and custom boards, and eventually started selling used gear, people's used windsurf sales,
Okay.
and added some more parts onto that, used windsurfing gear, new windsurfing gear, custom made stuff. And over the course of the next decade or so, really developed into one of the premier wind sports shops in the country and probably the world. In the
Wow.
90s, kiteboarding started taking off. By the early 2000s, that had really hit the scene here in Hood River, Oregon. So we added kiteboarding to the mix. More recently, about 5 years ago, we added wing foiling. And so currently, we're a pretty big wind sports shop, and we cater to a lot of different sports, and both new and used gear are critical parts of our business. And the used gear especially really allows people to get into the sports that otherwise wouldn't be able to, because some of the new gear can be a little bit pricey. And it also
Mhm.
allows folks who are already in the sports, who've maybe tried things out and want to progress, to cycle through their gear,
Mm,
so they can get rid of like the really big clunky stuff that everybody learns on, and start getting a smaller quiver of gear that's more nimble and fun. And so
okay.
you gear for us is essential, because it facilitates both people getting into our sports and facilitates people's progressions within the sports. And so that's kind of our business.
Yeah.
We love it. And then as far as our technological journey that brought us to ConsignCloud, we were the first surf shop to post used gear online. So we were
Wow.
kind of an early innovator there. And
What made you guys decide to do that? Why did you start it and no one else?
well, we're in a very unique position here because our location is kind of an epicenter for our sports. We get this very unique wind tunnel effect that attracts people from all over the world to come here every year. It's fresh water in a river. There are no sharks. So people like playing here.
Right.
And so
I've been to Hood River and I saw the many kites and people and sails. It's incredible sight.
yeah, it really is. It's amazing whether you do the sports or not. And the thing that we have going for us that really no other location does, we have so many people coming here and doing the sports and getting geared up and then looking to move to their next thing, that we have an amazing supply of this gear. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people every year looking to cycle through their gear. And so we have all this stuff. And I think we looked at that uh, and said, well, geez, everybody else in the country doesn't have this, so let's make this stuff available online too, so you don't have to make a 2,000-mile drive from the East Coast to Hood River to buy a
Right.
used windsurfing. And this was before eBay was really going. This is before Amazon was really a thing, right? So it really was a unique offering. That was successful. And you fast forward 10 or 15 years or so, program had continued to be successful. We obviously added gear from those other sports into the program.
Hmm.
And what we find today, and what we've been finding the last few years, is that the used gear business is a very different business than new gear.
Hmm.
You typically get lots of units of exactly the same thing. When you're selling new gear, you make a
Right.
nice listing for the new thing, you put some energy into the marketing, but then they're largely kind of fungible, right? You can just grab another one off
Right.
the shelf. With used gear, we do used gear on a consignment basis primarily. So not only is each individual item unique, because each item has different use, different
Right.
characteristics, some will have
Right.
repair. Um, so we need to list them individually and uniquely. We also need to manage our consignor relationships, a little different than a customer relationship, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
sell on their behalf. So we found that our systems that we've been using to do that were really not adequate. Very difficult to keep track of all of this, influx of individual used pieces of used gear and the consignor accounts and what was going on with our consignors versus the customers, and sometimes they'd be one and the same. And also the process for getting the gear in the system was very, very slow. The business has grown over the years, so
Yeah.
we've been at a point, really since COVID, where the volume of business that we do, it's just we're not able to keep the wheels on the bus with the way that we were doing things before because there's just not enough time in the day for us to process all these things and keep track of everything. So that's when we really started looking at new solutions that
Mhm.
could provide us with better insights, with more flexibility, and more tools to do a good job managing our used gear and our consignor accounts, and also integrate seamlessly with our website and the other things that we're doing.
Okay. I'm curious what you were using before and what were the cracks that showed up.
What we were using a few years ago was Microsoft RMS, which was a point of sale solution, and it was integrated with WebCell or NitroCell is what it used to be
Okay.
called. And it was intended to be sort of a one-stop shop e-commerce solution, just
Hmm.
for managing your own store inventory and getting it online. Um, it worked pretty well. The consignment aspect of the business didn't really fit with that program. And so there was
Right.
some custom software that was built and kind of integrated as an add-on to
Mhm.
Microsoft RMS. But it didn't really work very well. There were a lot of steps to get things into the system. It was all based on premise, like physical machines. It wasn't
Okay.
cloud based, so that was a
Okay.
problem. We
Right.
had to
Right.
go to like 3 or 4 different workstations to like snap the pictures over here, and then get the
Right.
thing in the system over here, and then go over to this other computer and publish things on 2 floors of the building in different corners. So it was a mess. Um, Also, the book, or I guess the consignor account tracking didn't really
Hmm.
work very well. It sort of showed people's sales, their consignment sales, in line with their customer purchases in kind of a funny way. And so it
Okay.
was very difficult to get perspective into, what are the items that people have for sale with us currently? What have they sold? What's their balance? They're just not very accessible.
Okay. Yeah. It sounds like, for us, time, accuracy, and cost are kind of the three areas where we see a lot of stores having issues in one of them. It sounds like time and accuracy were maybe a couple of those issues that your store is experiencing. What are habits or routines or mindsets that your store has implemented that's been essential to your success?
Well, that's a good question. I think we're still developing our habits and routines and trying to get better. We used to have like a camera mounted in the ceiling that we'd go over to a workstation and kind of take pictures. And it almost worked like an X-ray at the dentist's office, where it's like, okay, get everything ready, and now I'm going to go to my workstation and shields up, and we'll
Right.
see it. Right? Um, so we've been trying to move away from this like big process to a more quick, let's get it in there, let's get it going kind of
Okay.
system. And so today, when used gear comes in, we go through the logistics of the program with the consignor. We do a little bit of paperwork, make sure everybody's good with the program, And then we bring the used gear over, we bring an iPad over, we just grab one of our iPad cash registers and bring it over. We start snapping photos and getting
Nice.
in the system, ideally right away. It kind of depends on, our resources and what's going on that day.
Right, right.
But the goal is to make the process sort of, quick and easy to do so that we can focus our attention on inspecting the gear, right? On uh,
Mm,
punching out a product description that's going to be useful to people instead of having to spend all our time like, clicking here and doing that and going there and going here.
right,
So
right.
that's been the biggest change to the program. And then I think over time, just with the complexity of used gear, we're still on this journey. We want to have a smaller number of staff that specialize more heavily in just the used gear so
Mm,
that we can give it, the proper attention all the time and represent it really well. ConsignCloud has been great. It adds some complexity because there are so many capabilities, and that's
mhm.
great. But it does take somebody who's more immersed in it more regularly to fully utilize it. So that's kind of the direction that we're hoping to continue on is having people get a little bit more specialized in the used gear.
Okay. And that way, that intake process can be as quick as possible. Do all of these products go up onto your website? Do you all use the Shopify integration?
Yes, we use the Shopify integration. Every used item, for the most part, goes on our website, and we receive gear in different ways. So most of the gear that we receive comes to us as individual pieces or maybe a few items, from somebody who's clearing out their garage. And they're pretty big items. Uh, we
Mhm.
also get tranches of gear from people sometimes. So, we had one guy who was clearing out, a pretty big quiver of stuff. He sent us like a box truck full of equipment.
Wow.
We'll get batches like that from some of our brands where we carry their new gear
Mm,
and they have demo
mhm.
gear that or stuff that sits around a warehouse. We'll do warehouse clearance. So ConsignCloud's been really nice because we can just kind of snap it and go with the iPad approach. If it's
Mhm.
something that an individual person's bringing like one or two items, or if we get a truckload of gear, ConsignCloud has made it so much more efficient for us because we can get a list of that gear in advance. We can preload that, using spreadsheets and just getting the
Right.
information system. And then when it shows up, we're kind of checking it off and printing out labels and getting it in there. And so it enables us to receive large amounts of used gear in, an hour or two that previously would have taken us days and days of multiple people working on it to get it done. And now we can do that with just
Wow.
one person in a couple hours.
That's awesome. That sounds like a real kind of success. So it sounds like y'all do a mix of consignment and retail. Do you use software for all of it, or do you have separate softwares that you integrate for the retail and consignment aspects?
We have separate software that we use for different things. So we use ConsignCloud for all of our used gear. For the new gear, we use Lightspeed Retail. For our e-commerce, we use Shopify. So Shopify, it kind of sits on top of or at the center of everything. What we really like about ConsignCloud and Lightspeed is that they each do their respective jobs very, very well,
Mm,
uh, like the best, and they integrate pretty seamlessly with Shopify. So we're able to have this kind of unified presentation for people so they have a good shopping experience online.
mhm.
At the same time, we have all the capabilities that we need on the back end to stay organized and operate efficiently.
Okay. Just a quick couple personal ones. Do you do any wind surfing or kite
Oh
boarding?
yeah, yeah. I do all the above. I
Oh,
windsurf,
nice.
do a little bit of kiteboarding. I wing foil. Tried a little bit of downwind sup foiling, foil driving, and my goal for this season is to start getting into para winging because that's the newest thing, and it seems like it's kind of cool. It's like a blend of kiting and winging. Um,
That look like?
well, so winging or wing foiling is when you're like standing on a board, and the board has a mast that goes down below the board, and then there's like a little airplane underneath that mast. So as you get going, that airplane lifts off just like a real airplane, and you get kind of above the water, sort of New Testament style. And you're holding on to the wing with your hands, which is kind of like an inflatable windsurf sail that's not
Okay.
attached to anything. And that's what gives you your power. And so, that sport's been taken off a lot. It's a lot of fun. I do quite a bit of that. This Parawing thing that came out is sort of a blend between that and kiteboarding. So it's got all those elements I just described from wing
Uh-huh.
foiling, except instead of a wing, you're holding a little mini kite. You got a bar that you're holding in your hands,
Uh-huh.
and a bunch of lines that are attached to this parachute looking thing, and you're using that to steer yourself around instead of holding on to an inflatable wing.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are there not a million traffic pileups in the river there? There's got to be tons of crashes and people getting their kites tangled.
Well, it does happen sometimes, but surprisingly less often than you would think. Even with the traffic out there, because it's a very big river, mile wide at a lot of points. It's very long, and you can access it in many different places. One of the great things about wind sports is that unlike surfing, where you're on a surfboard and everybody's basically in one line trying to catch the same wave and kind of taking turns doing that because there's no alternative.
Yeah.
With wind sports, you can just jet wherever you want out there
Yeah,
and
that's true.
find your own zone.
That is cool. Okay, I've got three more quick questions and then we'll be done. Looking back on your business, what are some things you would have done differently with the knowledge you have now?
In our industry, like we're the action sports industry, and everything is kind of driven by marketing and people getting excited about all of our products and sports. It's incumbent on us to share the fun and the excitement with everybody. So I think, I would probably put more emphasis on maybe some of our marketing activities. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I think one of the things I think we could have benefited from early on actually is related to used gear, is just having a dedicated used gear person,
Hmm.
dedicated to consignment, dedicated to used gear. Um, again, because it is a very different business model than new gear. We've always had everybody doing everything, and that gets very difficult when there's so much complexity. So I think allowing people to specialize is something that we've been moving toward,
Hmm.
and I wish I could have and would have done more of that sooner, especially with the used gear. We've been able to do
Okay.
that with marketing a little bit. We've been able to do that with technology a little bit, but we haven't really done that to the same extent with the used gear program. So I think that would be key.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like consignment, resale, it's all just been increasing more and more and more over the years. Kind of hard to have predicted that, but it does seem like in some ways the future has so much more resale and consignment going on. Okay, last question here. What are you most proud of as a business owner, whether that's about your business or you and your employees?
Yeah, well, the thing that makes me most proud is when our customers succeed and get stoked and get into something new and have a great experience. And they share that with us. We don't always hear, when that happens. A lot of people get gear and they go out on the river and we never see them again. I love getting that feedback from people, hearing about their journeys, knowing that we had some small part in that. It's what we're all here for. At the end of the day, if we're not doing that, what are we here?
Yeah,
So that's my favorite. When we hear some of the great stories that our customers have, and a lot of them are pretty epic. I've had customers who talking about escaping shark attacks, not here, obviously, in other
right,
places.
right.
Folks who've almost gotten run over by ferry boats, but somehow miraculously hopped on top of them at the last minute. We had a guy.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's just all kinds of stuff. And also with the wind sports, people are going to all these interesting places too. So you're hearing about, everybody going to Hawaii or Turks and Caicos or Texas or,
Yeah,
any of these many places. So it's always fun to talk with customers and hear how everybody's getting into the sports. And that
right
is
on.
what keeps us stoked and on the water too.
Yeah, I've never done windsurfing or any of that, but I was a big skier, and there is just such a stoke environment in a lot of those sports where it's all about the stories, the fun, the actual doing of the sport. It sounds like your store has a passion for just living that sport out and having fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome, Nick. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to do a little interview with us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya.